All right, everyone. Well, welcome back to the Sensitive Podcast. As always, I am Kimball, your host and somatic leadership coach for highly sensitive and neurodivergent women business owners. And I have an amazing podcast episode for you today. I am so excited to talk about all things SEO with Mckayla, and I am going to allow her to introduce herself before we dive in.
Of course. Thank you for having me here. I'm very excited. You were part of my Pod to Blog challenge, and I feel like this really builds into that same theme. We had a very similar group of people that I think would be listening to your podcast as well. So very excited. But I'm Mckayla. I am the mama of, well, mama behind the Comma Mama Co. I'm a mom of three littles. They're all 5 and under at the moment, so definitely a little bit of a juggle. But I have had my business for about 6-ish years, and I've been doing SEO and blogging for a bit longer, probably around 8, because I started at the beginning of my college, of when I went to college, and I didn't even know what I was going to do with my degree at that time. And I was like, oh, this sounds really fun to do.
Mm.
And it's just kind of grown from there. But I really focus on creating SEO strategies and blogging strategies for service providers, business owners, entrepreneurs, anybody who just doesn't want to spend 90% of their time on social media adapting to algorithms and really wants something to kind of have their back in their marketing to show up for them when they can't. Very directed to neurodivergent entrepreneurs. I have ADHD, so it's really been something I've had to do. Actually, my husband has ADHD. We're pretty sure about my 5-year-old, but we'll wait until he's older. And who knows about the two youngest, but it's something that is very much rampant in our household, and we have to adapt throughout our entire life. So of course I bring it in my
Neuro complex beings around here as well in my household also. So yeah.
which also I brought up the term neurospicy to him the other day. He's like, I've never heard of it referred to like that. I'm like, I know, it's a fun one.
Yes, absolutely. But before we started and hit record for this, Mckayla and I were talking about how it's a miracle that we were able to come together for this podcast today because I have a sick child. She was having to juggle childcare situations back and forth. So you are in a podcast with two mothers who are entrepreneurs and neurocomplex, and we are here and we're doing this, right? So
Yes.
we were able to show up and do this thing. So I'm really excited to dive into this conversation with you. And really, I'm saying all that and I'm going into all that because I really personally am starting to lean into SEO much, much more in my business for all the reasons that I just said, of like it being really hard to show up to a call, even because I am a neurocomplex VA, because I am a highly sensitive person, because I have a toddler at home who has been sick 5 times minimum since January and it's February, right? And so I just would love to start us out on a level playing field of tell us, like, give us the I don't know, high school level version, middle school level version. What is SEO and why is it an amazing marketing tool specifically for highly sensitive neurodivergent people?
All right, so SEO stands for search engine optimization, and we optimize your websites, your content, anything that is on your site for SEO so that it can show up in search engines like Google or Bing or I'm sure there's more, but I can't think of the names anymore. But at the moment, mainly Google because they have the most dominant algorithm. We're kind of catering to the Google bots at the moment. But essentially, whenever somebody goes to Google and you have a problem or you're curious about something, you want to learn more about something, you put in a keyword, a search term, a search query, however you want to call it. It's called multiple things, and you'll see it referred to as multiple things when you go and look up information about it. But say I want to learn what SEO is, then I'm going to go to Google and I'm going to say, what is SEO? And while that would be way too difficult of a search term for me to rank for because there's a bunch of like keyword tools and stuff that are tackling that same one. The goal is for me to rank for what is SEO so that you find me and then you want to work with me or you trust me a little bit more or you come into my world when otherwise you wouldn't have found me. So it kind of bridges that gap between, okay, well, I have a limited circle on social media. Unless I go viral, or I spend an unwelcome amount of time on the platform, really nurturing and engaging, which I really just don't have time for. And so many people don't, or have patience for, or attention for, really.
Or it's just not
Um,
your thing. If it's just
yeah,
not your thing, yeah.
it's just not your thing. So, you can only nurture such a large community on there. And there's going to be other people out there who also do not like social media. So maybe that's not their main source of content consumption.
Ooh,
And
that's a
that's
great
where,
point.
hmm and that's where Google comes in. And with, I'm going to say it wrong, but the validity of platforms right now, where algorithms and just the people who are running the platforms in general, with everything being so wonky, it's really important to diversify it to show up when people, aren't comfortable being on Meta right now or aren't
Mm.
comfortable being in Facebook groups. Like I stepped out of Facebook groups for the past few years just because it was all in my feeds. And so while I do trust the people who are running those groups, like it's not my way to consume content. So mainly it's been Threads, it's been nice, and Google. When I have a question, I really go to Google.
Yeah, that's such an interesting point that honestly I have never thought about in this way of obviously, as everyone knows, I primarily work with highly sensitive neurodivergent women. And I hear so often from that group of people, likely because I mean, hi, I am those things myself, and I know it to be true that I get overstimulated very easily by social media, by the constant scrolling, by the constant input of information, like the constant intake of content, right? And so often I hear my people say, I don't want to be on social media. Like, that's
Mhm.
just not where I want to spend my time. And so that is part of why I've switched to SEO, but I've never, because I don't want to be on social media all the time, but I haven't thought about it from that other angle of like maybe your ideal client doesn't want to be either. Like maybe that's not where they're finding their ideal people either. That's such an amazing point. I love that.
Yeah, and you'd be surprised. I get inquiries every day who are not every day, but they come in, and I think my latest last week, one of the things was she's boycotting Meta right now. So she's like, I'm not on Instagram, I'm not on Facebook, I'm not on anything. And I'm like, well, that's the main social media platforms at the moment. So she'd step back and she's like, that's why I want to do this, is I need to build on a different platform because this is not what I want to do. And likely the people that she wants to bring into her circle are not interested in those either.
Yeah. And just the point as well as you're talking about of being able to diversify, when you're on pretty much social media, like I saw my heart really went out to everybody that had built such a tremendous following on TikTok recently when TikTok
Yeah.
went down for the blink that it did, whatever it was. I never have been on TikTok, but I was just seeing so many really heart-wrenching stories of like, this is what pays my mortgage. This is what
Mhm.
my it feeds my family, like all these things. And when you kind of put all of your eggs in that one basket, anything could happen. The point is anything can happen at social media at any time.
Yep.
And so being able to diversify, like you're saying, because there is no guarantees with any of that, the diversity seems really important as well.
And I mean, there is a level of risk with Google too. They're a company, but I really don't foresee them going anywhere anytime soon. And also, there are other platforms for search engines. Google just happens to be the biggest one right now. So if they drop out of the game, like there are still others that it doesn't matter that your website was mainly being searched on Google. It doesn't suddenly disappear if
Yeah.
Google does. It'll continue showing up on the other places as well.
Mm, love that. Well, I have heard you say this is another key point that I want to bring forward about SEO because it feels just very delicious and juicy and very important. But when people find you through SEO search, they're finding you because they're already searching for you. So that there's less convincing that needs to happen, which can really shorten the sales cycle, right? It
Oh
can
yeah.
make it so much easier, make potentially obviously be a quicker buying process. And so I would love for you to talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, so in SEO, you actually, and this is where blogging comes into, so you actually get to reach people at both ends of kind of your funnel, even though both ends, both people may not even know who you are. There are people who have somewhat of an issue, but they're not even sure like what a solution would be. So they're really looking for, okay, I have this problem. Like what can I do about it? Or even like I putting words to their problem. Like they're just not quite sure. And you can address them at that point in the funnel too. But you also have people at the other end of your funnel, or who are going to come into your other end of the funnel who are like, I have a problem. I know what the solution is. I just don't know who to go to. And so when they find you in Google and they read your blog post or land on your services page or just hit on your home page and they say, "Oh, okay, this is the person I've been looking for." Like they already have that mindset of I am ready to invest, or either they're just right on the edge of I'm considering investing, and that could be, you know, the difference between, okay, I'm ready to invest and they book a service, or, I'm almost ready to invest. I just want to learn more about you. There's your freebie. There's your podcast. There's a Facebook group, wherever you want them to be for you to convert, essentially, for you to nurture and engage. You can point them in that direction. You can point them in multiple directions because you're not limited to one call to action or one link to anywhere. You can place it where you need to put it, and they can have multiple options based on what they want to do.
Mm. So good. Yeah. And I think, in traditional marketing, there's so much limitation that just isn't here, with SEO marketing of either there's limitations like you're talking about of one call to action, or there's limitations in word count. There's all sorts of limitations, right? And this really does feel just more expansive all the way across the board without those limitations.
It is, and it makes it easier for no matter like what type of offer you have, whether you're e-commerce or you're a service writer, a photographer, or maybe you're a coach, like you can cater what you need or what you do to the content you create, and then therefore to the people you want to attract, the people who are searching for you because you are serving a need. And it very much differs in the intent of the purpose of your content that you're creating and the pages that you're creating on your website so that you can rank on SEO for on Google for SEO through SEO. Um, because you are speaking directly to someone. You're not trying to convince, kind of, because on social media, you're partially trying to convince them that you are the solution. And this kind of goes into the other question too, but you're partially trying to convince them and get their attention that you are the solution. Now, you do have people who are in your followers who are like kind of curious and kind of are considering booking. But most of them, you're trying to convince that sale, or attract that sale in that way. With SEO and blogging, they're pretty convinced already. They just don't know how convinced they are. You're not really trying to say that, I see your problem. This is the solution. Come follow me. They already have a general idea, or at least Google has a general idea that you are their solution. And they're just ready to learn more and kind of explore that option.
It's a really amazing way to put it of like Google has already like figured out you are the solution it is connecting you to.
Yeah, I mean, there's different intents for different searches, and Google recognizes that. They also recognize you as a user, and it's not as intuitive as it could be. Like, it's not as intuitive as our feeds on social media because it's very much curated to us and our interest. But Google will change your placement and rank and search and how you show up based on the person who's searching in their search history. Now, obviously, some people opt out of their histories being tracked and stuff, so it's not as intuitive in that way, but you could be first for somebody else or third for somebody else based on if Google thinks you are the best solution for them.
Mm. I learned so much in these conversations. I love it. Can you expand a little bit more about the difference between algorithm-based marketing and SEO-based marketing and how that can work to our advantage as business owners?
So it's actually pretty similar, because Google has their own algorithm for their search, but there's so fewer fewer adjustments or changes. And it's almost to a point that it's aggravating because you have websites from 10 years ago who are still ranking first for a search term, even if they're not the best option or solution. But because they've been around for so long and Google's like, well, we trust them, they get pushed to search. But it also benefits us in the way that, the average blog post reaches kind of its peak performance at 2 years.
Mm.
2 years before you can get a really good gauge of how beneficial that blog post will be to you. And that's not to say it stops ranking suddenly at 2 years. It could still continue to grow. You can go back and edit it and update it, and it'll even go even further. Spend 10 minutes on updating and you could jump a few spots. But the longevity of it is there. So it's less that, the algorithms are different. It's more of longevity of the content that, or of how you serve those algorithms. Because, we're not serving it for an hour or a few days even, or a month. And you kind of get out of that in some of platforms and some types of content, but you really do have that longevity. So it pays off for a long time, and it feels really good.
Mm. Did you give me the metaphor of the pebble in the stream?
No, but
That
I did
you?
give you a snowball. I don't know if I gave you the snowball, but I like to call SEO is a snowball. But
Okay.
even the smallest little things you do will
Yeah.
eventually. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Well, let's talk about content SEO. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, so content SEO can refer to two different things. So it can refer to the content on any of your pages, so the copy on your web page, on your homepage, your services. But normally when someone is talking about content SEO, they're talking about blogging. Um, and that's kind of like my bread and butter, my specialty there. And mainly because I just love it. I've been doing it forever. My original degree was going to be English, so I just didn't know what I was going to do with it, and turns out it's going to be blogging. Um, but blogging essentially brings it kind of boils down to you have about five, maybe max eight for most business owners pages on your website. You can only target so many keywords and show up for so many searches with those 5 to 8 pages. So let's just limit it to one per page. So that's 5 to 8 times that you could show up. Every time you write a blog post and it's optimized for a keyword, you have a chance to rank for another keyword, another page, another post, another spot in search. Um, of course, you have to still follow like some guidelines on how that content is created. So, making sure you have a keyword picked out. It can't be like 20 words. You have to hit a minimum of, I normally say about 300, 500 if you're feeling generous. And then you could write as long as you want to, but then you get into like, is this really good for the reader? Is this helpful? So there's definitely a few things to consider there, but you spend the time on the content, you publish it, and you have a chance to rank for another keyword. And you're not limited to how many that you do. You can do as many as you want. So if you have a lot of free time, then you can write 2 blog posts a week. You write 3 blog posts a week and have that as your main, you know, platform, content creation routine. Um, and it will continue to stack on top of each other because each little piece is just another piece of snow in your snowball. It's going to keep rolling and rolling and growing and growing. And of course, you could do one blog post a month and it still helps because you're still adding snow to your snowball. It's still growing and growing, just a little bit smaller, a little bit slower, really. But each bit helps and it doesn't suddenly go away.
Mm.
If you blog for a month, you blog for 2 months, you blog for 3 months, each one of those are going to continue to stack on top of each other and continue to grow. Just because you published, the third one doesn't mean nobody ever pays attention to your first one anymore.
Yeah.
No, all three of them will get attention.
Yeah, which feels directly in contradiction to, let's say, posting on Instagram, where it's like, okay, you're going to get exposure to that one post for what, like a day?
Yeah. I
And
would
then
say,
it's gone, right?
yeah, it,
So,
it just it
yeah,
disappears and you get a few lurkers on your profile who go through and they'll like go through your
right.
different posts. But how many people are really going back? If you have 300 something posts, how many people are really going back to
Yeah,
the 10th
exactly.
post you ever did?
Yeah, really, you've got like the nine at the top
Hmm.
of your grid, and that's kind of it. Yeah.
So it's not as short term because people. I've been blogging for on the Common Mama for the full 5 years that I've had the website. May Yeah, 5, 6, something like that. It's right along with my kid's birthday and or when I found out I was pregnant. So I always try and think back to it. I had nine
Yeah.
months, but it's a hard one. Um, but people still go back and read, download my freebie all the way back in that one because I can always update it for my current offers.
Yes.
You know,
Well,
it's
and that. Yeah, that leads perfectly into what I wanted to ask you about with the blog post, because there's a couple of things you were talking to me about of number one, updating, like you're talking
Mhm.
about updating your blogs, and then also like how you can adapt it to fit your stage of life and your writing style. So there's a couple of different tweaks that I know that you're great at with blog posts.
Oh yeah, I think that's one of the coolest things about blogging is that it's not permanent. Because I mean, we could go back and edit our Instagram posts. We absolutely could, but nobody's gonna read it. Nobody's gonna be like, oh my gosh, she changed it here. Or it's not gonna like make people read it more. It's just gonna be for our own benefit, really. But with blogging, you can go back, I could go back to those first ones and update them, and I have. Because you update it not only to fit your new offers, because I'm sure, once you're 5 years in, 3 years in, 2 years in, or
Have
maybe even
different
1 year in,
offers.
yeah, you're gonna have different offers, or you're gonna expand, or maybe your messaging is gonna be a little bit more clear. You're gonna have a better idea of who your audience is and who it isn't, or maybe you really find your writing style, or just any or freebies even. You switch your freebie, or you start a podcast and you're like, wow, I'm really good at converting on my podcast. I need more people to come and listen to it. You can go back, add the links, add the new offers, change the messaging, be a little bit more clear in your copy, redo the whole thing if you want to, and just use the first original as a reference. It's all fine. You have that versatility and flexibility to be able to do that. And then when you go back and do that and it better serves people, it provides more value, it's more helpful, it's more aligned to what people are searching for and what they need from you, you have a better chance of ranking.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm. Yeah, just that flexibility. I really kind of look at it as like building a library for yourself, right?
Hmm.
Of your own resources, of your own thought leadership. Um, that it's almost like having a book, but being
Yeah.
able to update that book. Because
Yes.
you always hear so much like, oh man, I went through all of this work to publish this book and it was this huge labor of love, and I look back on it and I can't stand anything that I said because my thoughts have like evolved so much, right? Like, and the book publishing process takes so long that by the time it's published, like, man, I think totally different than what I did when I published that book. And this is almost like that of for whatever it is that you do for your work, like for me as a coach, it's like, okay, let's say you went to a training and you now have an expanded skill set in this one area. It's like instead of that being in physical print that you cannot change, cool, I can go into the back end of my website and update it now that I have different thoughts on it, Like how amazing is that?
It's really cool. And then also those of us who have, you know, offers that relate to time sensitive platforms. So like Google, I write a lot of content around blogging and SEO, but then Google creates an update every now and again. So like last year they did 3 updates, and I think this year they did 1 update, and it relates to different types of content and different ways people search, and some of it won't even affect your content at all, or your website at all. If you're already following best practices, it's really just to knock out like spam websites, ChatGPT generated websites, um, or recently they've been trying to knock out those recipes. You have to scroll through like the history
Oh,
of
I hate that.
potatoes and
Yes.
then like their grandmother's story about potatoes before you can like learn how to make mashed potatoes. And
Jump
they're like,
to
but you could
recipe
also
is
make
my
it
favorite button.
until it doesn't work. It's always
I
so
know.
glitchy
It
because then they have all the ads though, and I'm like, oh my gosh. But so you're gonna have if you do that, then you're gonna have to start watching yourself because they're trying to make it where you can't do that anymore, or at
Mm,
least that you won't show up in search. So Pinterest would have to be like the only place you get your traffic, but that's another topic.
mm.
But it really does. You can always go back to content that you write and update it based on your algorithm or your platform's current best practices. Or say, I don't Twitter's name changed to X. You can always go back and update it.
Mm.
Broken
Yeah.
links, people update things all the time. And
Yes.
whether,
Feels like a
outside of
full-time
Google.
job, actually.
Mhm. It's I would say it's rough. I don't know if you turn these into blog posts, but definitely I brought in my own guest and I of course turned them into blog posts, and then they changed something on their website and I'm like, "Oh my goodness. Now I got to go
Yes.
back on mine."
Yes. It feels like a constant full-time job. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I want to talk about, I know we talked a little bit about like, give me a picture of what an SEO strategy may look like. Let's say if you're launching a new offer or if you're launching multiple offers at once, how would you, as an SEO expert, do that?
So this is kind of where it gets tricky. SEO is very much a long-term marketing strategy. It's not, if you decide that you want to launch um a new offer next week that's not related to anything that you currently do, but it serves the same people, so it's still in line with everything, but it doesn't tie in as well. SEO is probably not the route you want to go right now. That is not going to be your money maker or give you the greatest ROI in that month-long time frame. If you are ahead of the game and you're planning out your launches 3 to 6 months in advance, that's when you can kind of start thinking about SEO, because it wouldn't be making posts about the offer constantly. Instead, we go back to that end-to-end funnel. We go back to the awareness stage, to the buy stage, ready to invest, not quite right, not quite sure. And then we look at your offer and say, okay, how can we meet people in this funnel based on what your offer does? And we'd map out a content strategy, make sure we have a landing page, potentially have another landing page for a freebie, just so that we can hit all of those points. And that as a whole, that content batch to reach these people is pointing down into your landing pages that of the offer that you want them to invest in. Now, it can get tricky if you're doing time sensitive offers, but as long as that offer is still related, most of that content is going to be able to be reused. So if when your offer is over and you're like, okay, enrollment is closed, we're not doing this right now, and I don't know if I'm going to do it again, so I don't want to waitlist it, or I just don't have the energy to waitlist it, it's kind of like a one-off thing, then you can go back to those blog posts and find the offer that does relate the most. And if it's not an offer, it can be your social media, it could be get on my email list, it could be any call to action you want it to be. And then, if you want to redo it, then we go back to those blog posts, put those up again because they continue to exist. And who knows, by the second round of your group program or of a relaunch of your offer, or maybe you're doing a Black Friday sale. If you've had those up all year and you decide you're going to do a Black Friday sale, put your sale into those blog posts because anybody who reads those blog posts on those days will have access to your sale, and that can still be that extra umph and convincing them, okay, today's the day to invest. Today's the day to buy.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to talk more about that because I feel like my brain went a little like I'm always like so fascinated by people whose brain really works with like just knowing and understanding SEO so well because mine kind of goes like woo like so I want to hear more about how to meet people at different points in the funnel that you're talking about here. So is it more so, let's say, understanding that maybe somebody who needs a bit more nurturing, like you're going to have a blog post that's catered to that kind of language that has a freebie at the end that would help to nurture them more? Or how exactly can we meet people in different parts of the funnel like that?
So yeah, that's kind of what we're going to do is you're going to think about the intent and the person reading. I like to say that SEO is like, and this is going to be a little generous, but 50% Google and algorithms and all these and keyword picking and all this good stuff, and then 50% just people. It's, what they like to read, how they consume the content, what are their intentions, what are the trends right now, what are their values, what are they interested in, and meeting that in between to find the stuff that works. And that's really what meeting them in the middle, that funnel is also going to look like, because we have to think of what that person's going to be looking for at each stage. What do they need most? What would be top of their mind right now? So for me, if I'm thinking about SEO and visibility, I'm thinking, or SEO and blogging, I'm thinking visibility. I'm thinking visibility, or they want time off their computer because that most of my people do. They don't want to be attached to social media. Maybe they're frustrated with social media. They might not even know SEO exists. And that is a thing. Some people just are not aware of SEO. I mean, very technical. So when people find it, they're like, okay, I don't quite comprehend, or it's like a passing thought. And it's also not as attractive, I will say, as like social media or even Pinterest can be, um,
Mm.
because it's a little more techy. But I would say, okay, they're thinking visibility. But when somebody is down here and they're ready, like they just need that little extra oomph, they may even be taking steps to improve their SEO. And they're just not sure if this is something they want to spend their time on or if they'd rather outsource. And so that's the level of awareness I need to be over here. And it changes how you speak to somebody also in your content. So that person, the awareness stage, I'm going to say, okay, if they don't know what SEO is and I start diving into SEO, I might need to add a little blurb about what SEO is. But if I'm talking down here and someone's already considering me, I probably don't need to go as in depth about SEO. And I need to focus more on what they're getting, the changes that are going to happen, and the benefits of hiring me, even. Or, one, what's crazy is one of my best converting posts um, on my website as a blog that people come through Google to work with me is about guest posting. It's about finding guest post opportunities. And I have a few of them and they work very well. But these people who are reading it, these business owners who are reading these posts are actively trying to work on their SEO or trying to work on their visibility, trying to work on these collaborations. And most of them, this isn't their first choice. They're kind of doing it because they know they need it and stuff like that. Just does some people don't know you can outsource, or you do want to try it on your own, see how much time it takes you, and see if there is an ROI there before committing to anything. And many convert and inquire. They're like, okay, yeah, I was trying to do this on my own, but now I kind of think that I just want you to do it. Most people convert to an SEO audit and optimization because unfortunately, if you're trying to work on your off-page SEO, which that's what that is, the backlinking and stuff, but if you're trying to work on your off-page SEO, but your website's not in good condition, it's not going to have the impact that you really want it to have. And that's kind of like the general rule for anything SEO is that, if your website's not in good health, if the core piece of your website is just not there, all of your efforts, they may still work and they still will get you results even, but they're not going to like give you the best
Mm.
turnaround on that. But back to the funnel building. Yeah, so you just have to really be aware of what they're thinking, what their intentions are, what would benefit them at that point in time, whether that would be, a soft pitch, a hard sell, more explanation, or more how to. Maybe they need action. And there's no such thing as like giving too much for a blog post. If you're going to write it, solve it. If you are ready to write if I'm ready to write a blog post about how to write a blog post, I'm going to tell you how to write a blog post. I'm not going to like scooch around the topic in the hopes that you want to work with me, because then Google's not going to rank it. And also there's 1,000,003 other websites online who are going to tell you how to blog. But I want you to come to me. I want you to trust me, um, because I'm a different person. I would say a lot of people do end up working with me just because of my awkwardness, myself, and I'm okay with that. That would be my most of my differentiator. Because a lot of others in the SEO space, especially if you Google it, or like tools, so you have Moz, SEMrush, so you'll get suggested tools, or a lot of elderly men, I would say, which most of my audience don't connect with as well.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. A lot to consider there. I loved you saying if you want to write it, solve it. I feel
Yes.
like that's such a cool thing to just stick in your brain, because I think people can often have this question and query in their mind of like, well, how much do I give away for free?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how much do I give? Um, and just sort of knowing, at least for SEO purposes, if this is something that you want to lean into, just have that in your mind. If I'm going to write this, I'm going to solve it, right?
Mm-hmm. If you're gonna write it, solve it.
Because people never really pay for information at this point, folks. Like, that's not like they're all the information in the world is at everyone's fingertips. Really, exactly what Mckayla just said, of people come to hire her after reading these blogs is because they're like, well, I don't want to do this by myself, or I want to offload this. in my case, it's people coming to me because like, yes, I have this information and I understand this, but I need someone to hold this space with me and for me and walk me through the somatic coaching and walk me through the nervous system support instead of me having to do it on my own, right? It's not that the information isn't there, it's that they need someone to help walk them through it together. So really, just encouraging you all, if you're listening to this, to lean into giving away more of being able to say, like, if you're writing it, solve it.
Yeah, I'm not saying like give away your secret recipe or anything
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that. Like you can keep that to yourself. I mean, just avoid like that being your solution. I'm sure there's other things, and you could even say, okay, I've got this, and break it down to a really good extent and give them most 99% of the information, and then that 1% could be, but I've kind of got a secret recipe about this, and you can work with me and figure out what it is, or this is how I help my clients. Or continue to follow me and read more and learn how to create your own. Um, so there's different ways that you can integrate that without and still provide a lot of value and provide a lot of information and answer whatever query that you're trying to get in there, because you just don't want to like scoot around it and
Yeah.
in hopes that it'll still be helpful. Because that kind of leans into your readers' behavior and how people learn. And unfortunately, but fortunately, most people who are searching want to learn to a certain extent. That's why they're finding us online. That's why they're looking for a blog post. They have a question, a concern, they're curious. They want to learn what the solution is or learn about the actions they can take. And if you can serve it into a piece of content that they actually learn from and engage with, that's when it can convert to a follower, subscriber, um, or client.
Mm. Yeah. Love it. Well, you already briefly mentioned this, but I would love to talk about off-page SEO a little bit more and why it might be a good option if you don't have a lot of time on your hands.
Yeah, I love to put the different types of SEO in like their little categories. Like content SEO is great if you have a lot of time, but maybe your commitment's just on and off, because you can base that off of how often you blog, and just build it around whatever, your capacity is at the moment. But sometimes, if you're short on time, but you still want to see results or still want to do something, or you just don't have the capacity to write, like writing is not my thing. But I still want to grow some way. Off-page SEO is a really good way to go because you can build backlinks. So when another website links to yours, and it's in different ways. So there's not one way to do it. Anytime your website is mentioned in the online space, even your brand name can help contribute. If as long as you are regularly being called or referred to by your brand name on other platforms, can help you with your off-page SEO. Off-page SEO gives you a little boost because when another website says, okay, I trust this person enough to add a link, Google's like, okay, you trust them. I'll trust them a little bit more. And so the more trusted the website linking to you is, the more Google allows you to kind of borrow that trust.
Mm. Yeah, makes so much sense.
But it works because you can fit it into your capacity into whatever way. So you can either do like guest blogging if you're like, I can write, but I don't want to commit to my own stuff. So I'll write a blog post for another person. You can reach out to someone that, business friend who works with similar clientele, or you can reach out to somebody and say, hey, let's do a swap. You write for me, I write for you, or hey, are you just okay with me doing this? And just be open, say, I'm just trying to work on my visibility, and I think I could provide really good value to your audience. Like make sure you're making about their audience and not all about you, just but still be direct in what your intentions are. People will see through it if you're just trying to land on their website anyways, if you're trying to like BS your way through it. Um and then if you're like, I'm not a writer, you can do podcasts. Podcast guesting builds backlinks. So you put this on your blog and you link back to my website, or even if you just put it on YouTube, um, it's going to help my SEO because that's my off-page SEO being improved right there.
Mm. That was a perfect segue. I wanted to end on talking about, how you can use your podcast to improve SEO. And for those of you who don't know, I was just recently in this challenge with Mckayla. She did a pod to blog challenge, a 3-day challenge. which was really amazing and just jam-packed full of such awesome information. So I'm giving you this context because it was 3 days worth of information, right? She did a private podcast with it. Some of them were 45 minutes long. So I'm asking her to really synthesize a lot of information into one tiny question here, is basically what I'm saying. But can you give us like really high level, because I know you have so much on this, but just turning how you can use your podcast to improve SEO with turning them to blog posts?
Oh yeah. So, you upload your podcast onto podcast players. You have Apple, Spotify, Listen Notes ends up on there. And that's awesome. That is building your off-page SEO when that happens. But unfortunately, it's not really directly impacting your SEO in any other way because unfortunately, Google does not read an audio. It does not go into your audio file and say, this is really good. Let me put it somewhere. No, it only looks at your show notes, whatever it's on there. And unfortunately, because of how saturated podcast platforms are and because of how Google ranks them, it's very unlikely that you're going to get any Google traffic to your podcast episode through there. So it's really relying on you to share it in the right places, to
Mm.
share it on your email, put it in your Instagram stories, um, put it in a post, drop it on threads, however you want to do it. But it's really relying on you to take those actions. But when you take your podcast, take your transcript, and it has to be the transcript, and you dig through it and you create a readable, user-friendly version of your transcript to put as a blog post on your website. And you can do a blurb too. That's just like a shorter version. That's a little bit more extensive than show notes. But you put it on your blog, you target a keyword. You can even put your episode's embed in there too. But that can show up on Google and that tells Google, hey, this information is really helpful. And you can even improve your engagement because it's all about how someone's interacting with your website. The more they interact with your website, the better your SEO is be. Better your SEO will be. So when they stick around and they're like, "Oh, well, I really like this intro paragraph and I have time to listen to a podcast." Then, they hit play on your podcast and they're listening to it on your website. So that's more time spent on your site, which looks amazing to Google. But if they don't want to listen, they can still access that information. All the information that you already created, by the way, you're just putting it into a reader-friendly, SEO-friendly form. Like you've already done the hard work of creating the content. You're just putting it into a different form. Then they can scroll down, get the information they need, and convert, sign up, subscribe to your podcast for a day when they actually have time and they actually want to listen to a podcast episode because not everybody is prepared to listen to a podcast episode at all times. There's a pretty good difference in the time that people are ready to commit for a blog post. I believe it's around 45 seconds to 2 minutes. For a podcast, people are pretty ready to listen to an average episode of 45 minutes. So that the way that content is consumed is a bit different and the time related to that is a bit different. But when you do that and you create that second type of that second form of your content to consume, you reach a whole new level of people and it's all the content that you've already created.
Mm. I love this so much because I have had another podcast episode where I talked a lot, the former business mentor of mine, about repurposing content and how crucial that is for highly sensitive and neurodivergent business owners because we only have so many spoons, right? We don't have so much capacity. And so to be like constantly creating new content is really exhausting and super time consuming. And so this is such a beautiful content repurposing to me. Like as you were sharing this, I was thinking to myself, this is content repurposing with so much purpose and with so much intention because it's like, cool, I already have all of this amazing information, I already have this wonderful conversation that's jam-packed full of information. I don't have to reinvent the wheel. I don't have to spend all this, increased time. I can just take the transcript, doctor it up a little bit so it actually looks good in a blog post and doesn't look like you're not copy and pasting
Yeah,
the
no.
transcript. And and making a few tweaks and changes, that's going to be less time than if you were to come up with a brand new long form piece of content. And this to me is just it's the working smarter, not harder. And
Oh, yeah.
you're putting it into something that is going to continue to reap so much rewards of doing that hard work for you over the course, like you're talking about, a blog post 2 years of until it reaches its peak performance. So this is going to be working for you for the course of 2 years, which is just amazing.
And so, yeah, and then it also doesn't require the same like strictness either. You don't have to do every podcast episode. You can do the ones that you're like, oh, this would be really, really good, or a how-to one. You're like, this would be really helpful, because you getting away from the SEO a little bit, but for the blogging portion of it, when you have a link to drop, when people are asking questions and maybe you don't have the capacity to, or maybe you've already had an entire conversation in the DMs are like, hey, do you have a resource on this? You do. You have it as a blog post, and that blog post is your embedded podcast, so they can choose how they want to consume the content.
So good. I love it. So good.
Me too. That's why it's my life.
Yes. Well, this has been so immensely helpful. Thank you so much for your time with this. I love to do just a few rapid fire questions here at the end so people can get to know you a little bit better, if that's okay with you, before we part for today. Is that all right?
That's fine.
All right. Well, first of all, is there anything that you would like to say in closing that feels like it may need another moment from the podcast to wrap up today?
I would say 2 things. If you're gonna write it, answer the problem. And SEO is very much, you're building your snowball. Take the small actions, take the big actions, both will count and both will build. Like, don't try and push yourself to tackle it all at once in the hopes that everything will get done. No, just spend like 10, 15 minutes a day, 10, 15 minutes a week even, doing small SEO things, and it will help, I promise.
Be consistent with it. And I think the key thing that I want to mention there is, when I say consistency, I don't mean constant. It just means, like you're saying, you can choose what the rate is, whether that's 10 or 15 minutes a week or 10 or 15 minutes a day. Just being able to say, I'm going to be putting some efforts towards SEO on a consistent basis, which again does not mean constant. I think that's really important to specify the distinction at that for those of us with low spoons. So yeah. Well, what do you wish people knew about your experience as a highly sensitive neurodivergent person in the world?
Just how much I have to juggle, I will say. Like, I feel like with my 3 littles, I am constantly juggling, and I guess my secondary thing would be the amount of hobbies I have started and never finished. And I always like to say, it's not goodbye forever, it's goodbye right now. I'll come back to you later. But I am everywhere at once, and it both helps and harms.
Is that knitting in the background? What's that hobby?
Crochet.
Crocheting. Okay.
Yes.
For those of you who are audio and not seeing, there's a beautiful board of all of these wonderful yarns in the background behind her. So I thought maybe that was one of the hobbies for right now.
It is. And it became a business expense because it's storage and art. So now it's
It is. It does look like art. I love it. That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Well, what is the last thing that truly surprised you?
Oh my goodness, that's a hard one. I haven't been surprised in a hot minute, I will say.
I live very unsurprised.
Yeah, I would say life is pretty unsurprising. I don't know if it'd be surprising, but just the amount of times that I've popped a tire in the past year, I think we hit 8 times.
Oh my God.
We had to replace my tires 8 times. I've purchased 8 new tires in the past year, so that it gave me a little heart attack.
Are you running off the road? Like, what is happening?
Like, oh my goodness, it's nature. 2 were off in a hurricane. And then another 2 were off in the second hurricane. I ran over
all these hurricanes.
South Carolina. I live like exactly an hour off the coast, so we always
Virginia.
Get the little bits of it. So
all right.
Those 2 ones last year really got us. We were at the beach for one of them, and that's what took it out. We're like, oh well, that's what we're up.
8 tires is aggressive. 8 tires in a year and very expensive.
I asked for one of those punch cards, but they said they'd go broke.
I imagine so. All right, last question. What consistently brings you deep joy?
Oh my goodness. There's so much, really. My business, my children, my family, um, my hobby, um, trash TV. That's
What's your favorite trash TV show?
Oh my goodness. It used to be, or I guess reality. It used to be Little Women LA.
Okay.
And then lately I was watching Below Deck for a while, and then I was watching the Secret Lives of Mormon Housewives or something like that. Those Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. So I was watching that. That one's been a good entertaining one for me for a while.
Fun fact, we do not own a TV in our household. And this like freaks everyone out. Do not own
Pretty
a
cool
TV.
though.
You see the projector behind me
Mhm.
though. That's what we have. And we will like hook it up to Netflix and project it onto our like main wall down here in our rec room, which is great because it's like, I don't know, 100-foot TV, you know?
Yeah.
And we'll do that like once or twice a week, and that's it. Like to watch one show or two shows in a row, they're like equates to 40 minutes. And that's all we do. And that's all we have time for. And I'm like, how do people have time for anything else? I don't know.
I will say that my TV is not on because I'm watching it. It's on because I need background noise.
Mm.
Because if I do not have background noise, I am not functioning
See, I'm the
for some
exact
reason.
opposite. This is the neuro complexity thing. Like I cannot take that level of sensory. It sends me into overwhelm.
I can't
Sensory
have,
stimulus.
see, when I cannot hear if I don't have a loud, I would say stimulus, I cannot function because I hear the little ones. So if
Mm.
I don't have something to overcome, like the vents in the walls, or the dog outside, or the birds in front of the house, like all that is going to sit there and bother me, and I can't focus on one thing. And then my husband likes to pick on me because I'll be watching one thing and I'll have the kids' TV on the background and then I'll be working on something and he's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, this is the only way I can work. Or I'll put on a video and he's like, how do you even consume anything? And I'm like, to be honest, I'm just hearing them talk to help me write. Like this is just my world. Um this is how I function. Like if I don't
Amazing.
have all these different things, I feel like my brain does not function. When I got the walking pad, that was like a game changer. I was like, oh, I can hear stuff and I'm walking and I'm working. Like this is the epitome of calming my system,
Mm.
which
And
feels
see
so
that as
weird.
I'm over here, I've got my noise canceling headphones, and you know, of course, I work from home. And if the nanny is here taking care of my son, and he like come downstairs to go
Mhm.
outside and all that, I'm like, and I can hear it. I'm like, oh, I have to have my noise canceling on, or I just cannot function. I have to just like be in my own thoughts and my own little bubble. So this is a beautiful, perfect example of like different neurotypes. You know,
Oh yeah,
really
but
cool.
physical stimulus. Like if I can't stand. I don't like to be touched. I do not like people touching me at all. I am not the hugger friend. I am the I love you friend from a
Yeah.
distance. Um,
I love you over there.
yes, I love you over there, which was really hard for me when I had the kids. I have very cuddly children. I was like, oh, that feels so
Oh, see,
much,
I
but I'm melting.
don't. My son is not a cuddler. He is not a cuddler. He's sick today, as I told you, and he's very cuddly when he's sick, and that's kind of the only time. And it makes my heart so sad because I am like a physical touch person. I'm like, but like today, even I was like, I was giving him a hug. He was like, no hug, no hugs, going like this. Like, but I want to hug you.
No, I'll sit down in the armchair or something, which is like the smallest chair we own for us to sit in, and all three of them will come from the house. They're like, "Oh, mom's sitting down. Let me just sit on her." And they'll sit on the they'll sit on the arms and they'll sit on my lap or they'll try and scooch in and I'm like, "Y'all, I'm not."
Or that'll happen on the
This is
toilet,
so
quite frankly, at
yes.
times. It's like,
Yes.
yeah,
Oh, we have the smallest bathroom possible and
no
yet
boys.
I'll find a way
Yeah.
to sit in there with me. And I'm like, I can't even stand up without hitting the wall because this bathroom is so small and you're sitting in front of me.
Oh man, I love it. Well, thank you so much for sharing, not only in these moments for us to get to know you as a person a little bit more, which I have thoroughly enjoyed and loved, but also just your expertise in SEO and helping us to expand our minds on what is possible by getting off of the algorithm treadmill and having all of this work for us and our businesses. Please tell us a little bit more about how people can find you and work with you.
So you can find me on Threads if you want to like get a little bit more unfiltered of me at kamamama.co. And then I'm on Instagram about the same, but I'm pretty sporadic active. But if you DM me, I'm there 90% of the time.
I need DMs on Threads. That bothers me. I
I
have to
don't know
go
if I
back and
want it
forth.
or if I don't. I'm always in between because I'm like, well, if it's on Threads, I'm never getting on Instagram again. It's gone. It'll be
Yeah.
gone for me. But I think they don't want their platforms to compete too much because that makes people go off the Threads and come back onto
Yeah.
Instagram, and Instagram has ads and all that good stuff. But I'm sure there's a strategy there from them.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Or you can head to you can also head to my website, thecommamamacode.com. Um, and yeah. Well,
All right. Were you going to say something?
Um, I wasn't sure if I could say the pod to blog program. I also
Yeah,
don't remember when
absolutely.
this is
No, I'm
coming
saying
out.
to say about your
Okay.
offerings too of how people can work with you.
Oh, okay, perfect. There's also I'm doing my first done with you offer. So it's gonna be a 12-week program called TCM's Pod to Blog program. And it's gonna take everybody from turning their podcast episodes into blog posts and how to create a schedule or system workflow that works with your capacity so that you can still get results and see an ROI on your time while using the content that you already have. That's pretty much my biggest push right now. I'm very excited, and if you're a podcaster, I'd love to have you in there. It's going to be a lot of fun. But if you are not a podcaster and you still like to work with me, I do the done for you blogging, and I also do SEO audits and optimization. So if you're like, I don't really want to do blogging and I don't really want to do off-page, anything else, but I would like to have my SEO foundations in place. That is the way to do it.
Mm, beautiful. Well, make sure you check her out. And thank you so much again, Mckayla. This has been a delight.
Thank you so much for having me.